This month, we celebrate 60 years of one of Japanese cinema's most unique and endearing creations, an enormous jet-propelled turtle who smashes cities, befriends children, and protects the planet Earth no matter the cost. In this special two-part retrospective, we'll examine every film in this storied franchise and dive deep into the history of Gamera. I'm Tyler Martin, and this is Monsters from the Id. Japan's reputation for kaiju mayhem dates back to 1954 with Toho Studios' smash hit Godzilla. Following its success, the company tasked a core group of filmmakers with creating more monstrous spectacles, and an impressive parade of classics followed, like Rodan, Mothra, and other standout efforts defined by a unique aesthetic and different sensibilities from their Western counterparts. Despite the obvious draw of monsters and science fiction, the output of competing studios in this area was sparse, and even by the early 1960s, a creature feature to rival those produced at Toho had yet to be seen. Having long been established as one of the leaders in Japan's motion picture industry, Daiei Studios had earned global prestige with the period classics Rashomon and Gate of Hell, placing them on equal footing with Toho abroad as well as at home. In 1963, Daiei founder and president Masaichi Nagata felt it was high time to get in on the monster action. Thus was conceived Giant Rat Horde Nezura, in which a swarm of giant rats would overrun the streets of Tokyo in horrific fashion. The production, as it turned out, was indeed a horrific affair. As the lab rats initially obtained for filming were judged to be too cute and docile, the highly questionable decision was made to use real sewer rats instead. Unsurprisingly, disaster followed. The rodents attacked crew members and devoured one another. The captured animals and the fleas they had brought with them spread like wildfire, soon causing problems outside the studio walls. The crew managed to lens only a few scenes before the health department ordered an end to the production. The rats were duly exterminated, along with any hope of Nezura ever seeing the light of day. Despite this setback, Nagata remained determined. A shady character whose career was rife with controversy, from bribery scandals to suspected connections to organized crime, he nonetheless had a keen sense for the movie business, and it seems, for imitation. As the story goes, he was on a plane returning from a film festival in the United States when he spotted a cloud which resembled a huge turtle soaring through the sky. The veracity of this tale is doubtful, as it bears a striking resemblance to Toho producer Tomoyuki Tanaka's account of the genesis of Godzilla. Tanaka had been on his way back from Indonesia, where an international co-production had just fallen through. In desperate need of a replacement project, he is said to have looked out at the ocean below and imagined a sea monster. What is more, the special effects company P Productions, in an effort to gain support for a proposed TV series, had recently screened an episode at Daiei which happened to feature a flying tortoise. Whatever the origins of the idea, Nagata ordered his staff to bring his vision of a giant sky-born turtle to life. In short order, screenwriter Niisan Takahashi turned out a treatment which was immediately approved for development. The resulting script, entitled Giant Monster Gamera, was offered to Nezura director Mitsuo Murayama, who turned it down, likely due to the prior fiasco. The project ended up in the hands of rookie filmmaker Noriaki Yuasa, whose recent debut feature, the musical comedy If You're Happy, Clap Your Hands, had been a critical and commercial bomb. Yuasa sensed that this was the make-or-break point for his career and resolved to throw everything he had into the project. Likely owing to Yuasa's previous failure and the debacle of Nezura, Daiei lowered their expectations and allotted a smaller budget than initially planned. As a result, the picture was shot in cost-effective black and white, and the special effects crew were forced to cut corners. Nevertheless, everyone, from the director on down, put in their best effort to make Gamera a reality. Working from sketches by production designer Akira Inoue, a multitude of suits and props were constructed by veterans who had been bringing monsters into being for years. As might be expected, the costumes were a heavy load. Experienced suit actors were apparently unavailable, and few of the amateurs assigned to the role lasted more than a day or two. Accidents and technical snafus abounded, from damaged props to equipment breakdowns to a suit performer nearly being electrocuted when he suddenly found himself sharing a water tank with a fallen lighting rig. There was also internal friction. In Japan at the time, it was common practice for effects-heavy films to be shot by two separate units, one for live action and one for special effects, each under a different director. Effects supervisor Yonesaburo Tsukiji and his crew took offense at Yuasa's aggressive hands-on approach to both units, with Tsukiji ultimately quitting the studio after production wrapped. It was a heavy ordeal for all involved, especially Noriaki Yuasa, on whose shoulders rested the highest responsibility. Studio higher-ups openly scoffed at the director, displaying little faith in the project that had come to mean so much to him. But as the picture eventually began to take shape, even the skeptics changed their tune. Giant monster Gamera opens in the Arctic Circle with scientist Dr. Hidaka visiting an Inuit village to inquire into stories of a strange turtle that was said to inhabit the fabled continent of Atlantis. Nearby, the Cold War suddenly turns hot when an unidentified aircraft carrying atomic weapons is shot down by the United States Air Force. The ice splits open, and a colossal turtle monster emerges. Based on his conversations with the local chief, Dr. Hidaka identifies the creature as the Devil's Envoy, Gamera, the very same beast he has come to investigate. The creature heads to Japan, where he draws the attention of a reclusive young boy named Toshio. In a puzzling scene, the child is rescued by Gamera when he falls from a lighthouse, prompting him to spend the rest of the film trying to get as close as he can to the monster, whom he believes to be the alter ego of his pet turtle. As Gamera's attacks continue, Dr. Hidaka observes that the monster feeds on heat energy and is impervious to attack. Even more incredibly, the creature is able to withdraw into his shell and take to the skies via jet propulsion. Gamera soon lays waste to Tokyo, and the situation becomes desperate. The world's scientists reach the conclusion that the only hope is to modify the Z-Plan, an expansive project of vague purpose which is based on nearby Oshima Island. The monster is lured to Oshima, where he is ultimately trapped inside a gigantic rocket and shot off to Mars, where he will surely cease to threaten the people of Earth. Giant monster Gamera is certainly not devoid of flaws. The convenient presence of Dr. Hidaka and company investigating the legend of Gamera just as he appears is a coincidence that beleaguers belief. The non-actors portraying U.S. Air Force personnel are incompetent to the point of being an unintentional highlight. The original purpose of the Z-Plan, a crucial plot point, is never addressed. But in spite of all this, and especially considering the strong headwinds it faced, it is impressive that the movie turned out as well as it did. The special effects are plentiful and relatively consistent in quality, a testament to the tireless efforts of the crew. The black and white cinematography implemented as a cost-cutting measure works in the film's favor, with Nobuo Munekawa's camera work lending a sense of atmosphere. The music by Tadashi Yamauchi, a one-time pupil of the legendary Akira Ifukube, is moody and memorable and underpins the drama rather nicely. The cast, headed by Daiei star Eiji Funakoshi, generally comes across well, the aforementioned Americans notwithstanding. One of the most interesting aspects of the film, often noted but rarely discussed in earnest, is the odd behavior of the boy Toshio, who seems to exhibit signs of a mental disorder. This topic is covered at length, complete with professional analysis, in a separate video. While hardly the finest kaiju eiga ever made, Giant Monster Gamera is undoubtedly one of the most significant, introducing a memorable new character and breaking Toho's monster monopoly. Released on November 27, 1965, Giant Monster Gamera was a surprise hit, exceeding all expectations and vindicating the hard labors of Yuasa and his crew. Moreover, Masaichi Nagata greatly enjoyed the film and was delighted with its strong performance. It was picked up by American International Pictures and released in the United States the following year in a re-edited version titled Gamera the Invincible, which included new scenes featuring American actors. The additions are largely of dubious quality and necessity, and the credits even downplay the Japanese origins of the movie. Even so, Gamera had found an audience overseas. With proven box office gold on their hands, the studio rushed a sequel into production, granting a budget of 80 million yen, double that of the original film, and a more generous shooting schedule, affording full A-picture status to the endeavor. Niisan Takahashi was again brought on board to pen the script, but this time, the more seasoned Shigeo Tanaka was hired to direct, with Noriaki Yuasa assigned to the special effects unit, a sign of the heightened expectations for the new entry. Though discouraged at being demoted to a secondary role, Yuasa decided to make the most of the experience, sparing no effort in the creation of the film's effects. In Gamera vs. Barugon, the Plan Z rocket collides with a meteor, freeing Gamera, who returns to Earth. Meanwhile, a group of conspirators heads to New Guinea to retrieve a large opal found and concealed there during the war by their associate. The devious Onodera makes off with the jewel and leaves the straight-laced Keisuke for dead. He is rescued by the islander Karen, who warns that what they found was not a jewel at all. The opal turns out to be the egg of Barugon, a deadly monster. Carelessly left under an infrared lamp, the egg produces a small reptilian creature which quickly grows to enormous size and wreaks havoc in the cities of Kobe and Osaka. Barugon emits a freezing mist from its chameleon-like tongue and a rainbow-colored ray from its back, which attracts Gamera, who does battle with the new menace only to be put into a deep freeze. With the help of Karen and a repentant Keisuke, scientists and the military attempt to eliminate the threat, to no avail. When all hope seems lost, Gamera thaws and hurries off to settle the score, dragging Barugon to a watery doom in the depths of Lake Biwa. Sporting visibly higher production values and a more mature bent than its predecessor, Gamera vs. Barugon is a strong outing, similar in many respects to the competition at Toho. Tanaka's direction is sound if a bit dry at times, and the larger scale is readily apparent. Composer Chuji Kinoshita offers up an excellent score that powerfully accentuates the action. The characters are well drawn and well cast, with the tormented Keisuke at the center, determined to rectify his tragic error. The earnest Karen, who only wants what's best, and the thoroughly despicable Onodera, who will stop at nothing to satisfy his own greed. Gamera, appearing for the first time in color, is properly menacing, as is his opponent. Noriaki Yuasa takes advantage of the increased budget and displays a knack for effects direction, with well-staged urban destruction and monster battles that only occasionally falter. The movie suffers from a fairly hefty runtime of 100 minutes, which includes a few tiresome expository scenes. The initial US release by American International's television arm, AITV, excises these sequences to the film's benefit. Released on April 17, 1966, just 6 months after the first film, Gamera vs. Barugon performed modestly at the box office compared to its less costly precursor. Despite the disappointment, Nakata and company knew better than to give up on a character with so much potential. It was time to reconsider strategy. Why had Gamera vs. Barugon failed to win over viewers? Yuasa contended that it didn't speak enough to kids. By the mid-1960s, viewership of the genre, once popular with general audiences, was beginning to skew younger. As a result, Giant Monster Gamera had been the first kaiju eiga to prominently feature a child character, even going so far as to have the monster rescue the lad for no apparent reason, a scene to which children had responded enthusiastically. Barugon, with its emphasis on character drama and talky exposition scenes with nary a kid in sight, had failed to resonate with children the way the first film had. It was therefore decided to shift gears. Working with a budget midway between those of the first and second films, Yuasa was again handed the directorial reins, this time over both the live-action and special effects sections. Hoping more than anything to capture the hearts of children, he eagerly set about making this movie exactly the way he wanted. In Gamera vs. Gyaos, Japan is thrown into confusion by a series of seismic flare-ups, culminating in the eruption of Mount Fuji, which attracts the heat-loving Gamera. Nearby, engineering foreman Tsutsumi is having a tough time with the construction of a highway, as the local villagers are sabotaging the work of his crew and demanding a higher selling price for their land. Amid all this, a giant bat-like monster emerges and makes to devour young Eiichi, the grandson of the village elder. Luckily, Gamera appears and confronts the creature. Though badly wounded, he manages to rescue Eiichi and carry him to safety before retreating into the ocean to recover. Tsutsumi and Eiichi become valuable players in the official response to the new threat, which the boy christens Gyaos. A nocturnal creature which is harmed by sunlight and fire, Gyaos remains hidden during the day. Eiichi conceives a plan to set fire to the mountain, thus drawing Gyaos from his lair and luring Gamera back to finish him off, an idea that his grandfather, remorseful for his prior greed, takes to the authorities. The strategy works, and Gamera goes another round with Gyaos until dawn, finally pulling his weakened foe into the blazing crater of Fuji. Gamera vs. Gyaos is a tour de force of childlike wish fulfillment, monster action, and pure zaniness. Recognized as an expert by those in charge, the young boy becomes a consultant on the situation, filling the apparently clueless scientists and military personnel in on the monster's characteristics and habits, an affirmation of the director's awareness of his audience. When it is determined that sunlight is fatal to Gyaos, a plan is enacted to lure it with a vat of synthetic human blood situated atop a giant turntable, upsetting its equilibrium long enough for the sun to come up and finish the vampiric creature off. While unsuccessful, this is one of the most sublimely daft notions ever proposed in a monster movie. Yet in the world of the film, it all seems perfectly natural. With surprisingly solid human drama, a standout score by Tadashi Yamauchi, and plenty of memorable moments, this one is clearly determined to satisfy. But of course not everything works as well as hoped. The reduced budget and abundance of special effects results in a fair few stiff and hokey visuals, and the plot does present a few head-scratchers. Regardless, Gamera vs. Gyaos reaped huge earnings upon its release in March of 1967. Once again, Yuasa's determination and insight were vindicated, and the path for future entries in the series was secured. From this point forward, Gamera would be the friend of children. The success of Gamera vs. Gyaos was especially noteworthy given the profusion of monster-centered entertainment appearing on film and television, with Ultraman dominating the airwaves and no fewer than 5 kaiju epics hitting theaters in 1967 alone. Toho, who had until recently been the only purveyor of giant monsters on the big screen, saw box office receipts for their creature features dwindle in the face of the new competition. But the fact was that the Japanese movie business was not what it had been a few years before, and ticket sales overall had begun to slip noticeably. With TV providing free entertainment at home and the working class receiving the raw end of Japan's economic boom, people just weren't going to the movies as much. Daiei too was feeling the pinch. More so, it turned out, than anyone expected. A clear sign of trouble came in the form of a drastically reduced budget for the next film, 24 million yen, a sharp drop from Gyaos's 60 million, leading Yuasa to the conclusion that Gamera vs. Virus would be the turtle's last hurrah. Again handling both live action and special effects, the director worked himself to the bone for 25 straight days to make what he assumed would be the end of the series. The movie features hostile aliens from the planet Virus who have their sights set on Earth. The only thing standing in their way is Gamera. To solve this dilemma, they decide to exploit the monster's soft spot for kids, taking as hostages a pair of Boy Scouts, the tech-savvy Masao and his lasso-wielding buddy Jim. The Virans take control of Gamera, threatening to slay the boys if he, or the people of Earth, dare to resist. Via stock footage from the first 2 entries, the monster attacks Japan. However, Masao and Jim cleverly manage to turn the tables on the bad guys, who discard their humanoid disguises to reveal their true squid-like forms and merge with their leader to become a tentacled monstrosity, which then mixes it up with Gamera. In the end, Gamera triumphs, the world is saved, and the boys are reunited with their loved ones. Despite the trying shoot, Yuasa's direction is spirited, with the scenes of Masao and Jim being a real highlight. The deal struck with American International, the series' stateside distributor, had come with a few stipulations. In order to increase global marketability, the company requested the addition of a Western face into the mix, which resulted in the casting of Carl Craig Jr., the half-Japanese son of an American service member stationed in Japan, as Jim. This ends up being a boon for the film, as Craig gives a terrific performance and has excellent chemistry with his counterpart, Toru Takatsuka. The two make for a very likable pair of young heroes. Far less successful was the American firm's demand for a 90-minute runtime for the international cut, resulting in Yuasa's much brisker original being padded out with nearly 20 minutes of stock footage from the previous films under the pretext of the aliens examining Gamera's past. This stops the film in its tracks, and while the energy level picks back up once the story resumes, it never quite regains its strong initial momentum. Inevitably, other budgetary woes are on display, with some clunky effects and the embarrassing inclusion of black and white footage from giant monster Gamera in an otherwise full-color film. Back on the credit side of the ledger, composer Kenjiro Hirose introduces the beloved Gamera March, which remains synonymous with the character to this day. Opening in March 1968, Gamera vs. Virus was a major hit. Such was its success that Daiei asked Yuasa if he could make not 1 but 2 Gamera films per year going forward, an idea the beleaguered director could not stomach. Still, the immense profitability of Virus assured that the series would continue, at least for the time being. The next outing, Gamera vs. Giran, takes the outer space theme of the previous film a step further by sending the protagonists to an alien planet. Aspiring astronomers Akio and Tom witness a flying saucer landing in a vacant lot. Accompanied by Akio's little sister Tomoko, the two go to investigate and recklessly board the craft, which takes off on its own with the boys inside. When Tomoko tries to tell the adults around her about what happened, only the kindly policeman Kondo takes her story seriously. Meanwhile, Akio and Tom are whisked to a faraway planet where they witness a fearsome knife-headed monster make mincemeat of an extraterrestrial version of Gyaos, before encountering a pair of women who explain that this beast is their guard dog, Giran, who defends them from threats like the space Gyaos. While appearing friendly at first, these beings, the last of a dying race, prove to be anything but. They plan to consume the boys' brains to gain knowledge of the Earth, which they hope to conquer. As Gamera comes to the rescue, the boys strive to outwit their captors. After a colorful struggle, Gamera defeats Giran and returns Akio and Tom to Earth. Shot on a budget roughly equivalent to that of Virus, Gamera vs. Giran takes the series to the peak of absurdity. The whole thing plays out like the fevered dream of a 10-year-old child, with a trip to an alien world populated by bizarre beasts and a pair of brain-eating space babes. Unfortunately, Akio and Tom are neither as personable nor as well acted as the duo in Virus. Little Tomoko, on the other hand, is much easier to empathize with. It is in her scenes that Yuasa's child-loving spirit shines through best, with the addition of a clearly sympathetic adult character, beloved comedian Kon Omura in a wonderful performance, contrasting nicely with the dismissive mothers. Much of the effects work is slipshod, with optical composites being especially dodgy. On the other hand, Giran is an inspired creation, easily one of Gamera's most memorable foes. One notable feature of Yuasa's monster scenes is the profusion of gore, something notably lacking in Toho's kaiju films, as effects legend Eiji Tsuburaya was keenly aware of children in the audience and felt such brutality was inappropriate. According to Yuasa, Tsuburaya even sent a representative to meet with him and pass along a request to tone down the violence in his films. Yuasa declined, he said, because Tsuburaya would not meet with him personally to discuss the matter. In Giran, this habit reaches grotesque heights as the bladed beast graphically slices a hapless space gyaos to pieces and makes to dine on the dismembered creature, only to decide that it's too smelly to eat. This scene reportedly shocked the kids watching, and from this point on, Yuasa would let up a bit on the carnage. Perhaps he should have listened to the old man. Gamera vs. Giran's strong returns ensured another film was in the offing. Reasoning that his movies were making serious bank for the studio, Yuasa managed to negotiate an increased budget for the next installment. The production, though, was a trying one. Even with more funding on hand, the studio's financial struggles were a source of endless stress for everyone involved. Topping it all off, tragically, a crewman suffered a cerebral hemorrhage during shooting and passed away soon after production wrapped, casting a pall over the proceedings. Gamera vs. Jiger was produced in cooperation with Expo 70 in Osaka, and again features a pair of boy protagonists, Hiroshi and Tommy, along with Tommy's kid sister Susan. The Expo is threatened by Jiger, a legendary monster from Wester Island. A large statue called the Devil's Whistle is removed for display at the Expo, freeing the beast, who follows the statue to Osaka. Gamera comes to the rescue but is injected with the creature's parasitic offspring, collapsing at the water's edge. In a move inspired by Fantastic Voyage, Hiroshi and Tommy hijack a mini-sub and use it to explore Gamera's body, hoping to find a way to save him, which they manage to do, and help to uncover Jiger's weakness in the process. The secret lies with the statue. Gamera is resuscitated, and following the guidance of the children, retrieves the Devil's Whistle to deal the final blow, saving the Expo. Gamera vs. Jiger is a marked step up from Giran, with the boosted budget making a clear difference. There are several genuinely impressive visuals. The cast and characters come off better this time too, with Hiroshi and Tommy being convincingly noble and sincere, and one feels for them as they struggle to be taken seriously. After all the times Gamera has come to the rescue of children, the idea of kids taking action to help save the monster is a satisfying one. Kon Omura again plays an understanding adult, this time Hiroshi's father, creator of the mini-sub, and his charm is just as infectious this time around. Despite some inconsistent effects and other foibles, this is easily one of the best entries in the original cycle of Gamera films. Even though Gamera vs. Jiger proved just as successful as its recent predecessors, Daiei was by now on life support, barely being held above water by Gamera and a seemingly unlikely ally, the blind swordsman Zatoichi, whose wildly popular adventures had made a megastar out of actor Shintaro Katsu. But not even super turtles and sword-wielding masseurs could save the studio now. In the months leading up to the next Gamera picture, Masaichi Nagata enacted mass layoffs and began selling company real estate. After years of loyal service and earning the studio handsome profits, Noriaki Yuasa was terminated as a regular employee at Daiei, henceforth to work for the studio as a freelancer. The writing was on the wall as cameras rolled on Gamera vs. Zigra, which finally began production after a string of delays and budget cuts. In the film, marine biologists Ishikawa and Wallace from the Kamogawa SeaWorld theme park, along with their children, Kenichi and Helen, learn the plans of Zigra, a shark-like alien entity who is appalled at the polluted state of Earth's oceans and wishes to cleanse and occupy them while harvesting the human offenders as food. A sinister woman serves as his agent. Gamera challenges the invader, who incapacitates him with a powerful ray. The villainess sneaks into SeaWorld in search of the children, who know too much and may present a threat. Scientists manage to see through her tricks, and thanks to their intervention, she loses her evil identity, revealing that she is a human who was abducted from a lunar base by Zigra. Gamera eventually revives and confronts the menace once more, this time winning the day. Zigra may have been evil, reflects Dr. Ishikawa, but he taught us the value of keeping the ocean clean for the sake of all the Earth's creatures, human and otherwise. This is a sound message in keeping with the rise of environmental awareness then going on globally. Toho's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, released just a week later, was built around similar themes. But whatever its intentions, Gamera vs. Zigra clearly suffers from the adverse conditions in which it was made. Zigra causes massive destruction and wipes out all the world's defenses off-screen. Instead of amassing an army, he takes but a single human as a slave. This is just the tip of the iceberg for an obviously troubled picture, but there are some notable positives. SeaWorld employee Yamada, played by actor-singer Shin Minatsu, is a nice supporting character, mixing comic relief with touching compassion towards the animals he cares for. Prolific composer Shunsuke Kikuchi, who had scored the previous 2 Gamera films and whose wide-ranging credits include Dragon Ball, Kamen Rider, and Abarembo Shogun, kicks things up a notch with some of the wildest, grooviest music ever to be heard in a film of this type. The veteran cast and crew handle things about as well as can be expected, and while the film may be a slog, that it was finished at all stands as a testament to their professionalism. Although the next outing, Gamera vs. the Two-Headed Monster W, was in development, it was destined not to get very far. Shortly after Zigra's release in July 1971, Daiei Studios finally declared bankruptcy, with many employees having not received wages for recent work. Depending on the source, someone, be it a horde of disgruntled staffers, Noriaki Yuasa himself, or both, is said to have stormed the studio and destroyed various monster suits, props, and more in a rage. Masaichi Nagata, hospitalized with hypertension, was confronted by Niisan Takahashi, who finally succeeded in securing payment for himself and his fellow workers. After years of resistance, Daiei, once a top contender in the motion picture business, had finally collapsed. Its remains were eventually picked up by Tokuma Publishing, and the long, slow process of rebuilding commenced. As the years went by, Yuasa found steady work in television, with Gamera seemingly a thing of the past. But as the 1970s drew to a close, he and Takahashi would get one more shot at the character they had helped bring to life, albeit under harsh restrictions. New Daiei got things rolling on this film with the awareness that Toho's own Godzilla series had been put on ice, and the demand for monsters was not what it had once been. Their solution was to cheaply construct a Gamera movie out of footage recycled from the previous 7 pictures, tied together with a newly conceived plot. Gamera, Super Monster, sees the Earth threatened by an extraterrestrial force called Zanon. In a strange nod to the original film, Keiichi, a boy whose pet turtle appears to have turned into Gamera, is on hand to help a trio of alien superwomen in their fight against the evil machinations of Zanon, who sends one monster after another in an attempt to take over the planet. Gamera, of course, has other ideas, and dispatches each threat in turn. In the end, the heroic tortoise flies headlong into the invader's massive spaceship, sacrificing himself to save the Earth one final time. The truly minuscule budget is on full display in this final franchise effort from Gamera's co-creators, who went about the project with little excitement. New footage of the titular beast is limited almost exclusively to a nearly immobile prop depicting the creature in flight, and a brief glimpse of his feet and tail. All of the other monster footage is lifted directly from past entries, though recut with consideration to the threadbare plot. The filmmakers may have been unenthusiastic, but one would never guess watching professional wrestler Maki Fumiake's vivacious performance as Kilara, the lead spacewoman. It's hard not to smile with her exuberant presence lighting up the screen and the speakers, as she also provides the vocal for the opening theme song, which was composed by Shunsuke Kikuchi, who returns with a funky soundtrack which likewise helped to enliven the largely unimpressive proceedings. From the beginning, New Daiei had displayed little faith in this venture, giving its creators precious little to work with and getting more or less what they paid for. The painful decision was made to kill Gamera off when it became apparent that the series simply could not continue under the current circumstances. Recalled Yuasa, "I grieved for my son Gamera. It was a very strange fate." He had risen to prominence as the Devil's Envoy and taken flight as the friend of children. But by now, things looked about as bad as they could get for the super monster. With his own creators having thus sent him off, he now seemed destined for obscurity. Things don't look so good for our shellbound friend now, but the story isn't over yet. Be sure to tune in for the finale, when we'll find out how Gamera fares in the hands of fresh talent, as well as what happens when you drop your hot dog at the beach. Until then, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, and subscribe for more Monsters from the id. As always, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.